Hello, and welcome back to the Future in Review podcast. I'm Berit Anderson, the COO of Future in Review. And for those of you who have never heard of Future in Review before, we run the annual FIRE conference coming up November 6th through 9th, 2023 in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, which The Economist has called the best technology conference in the world. So the other arm of our business, Strategic News Service, provides its subscribers with the most accurate source of information about the future of technology and the global economy. And I'm here today with Mark Anderson, who is the CEO of Strategic News Service and the chair of Future in Review. We are going to be talking about his most recent issue of the SNS Global Report, which is focused on the future of the financial system and what to expect from banks in general. Everyone is a bit nervous about the US financial system, especially at this moment. So we're going to talk more about that. But Mark, I want to start by asking you about, there's been a lot of speculation about what caused all of these recent bank failures, SVB, Signature, and Silvergate. And I want to hear from you. I think you have a more unique perspective than most about what really caused it. And how is that different from what the media has been saying?
Right. So I think that there's a general media message out there, which is that SVB was badly managed and it was their fault, and shame on them for doing that. There are two banks you mentioned there, which are basically crypto banks. And I'm going to pull those out of the question because crypto banks shouldn't be banks. I'm sorry, shut them down. You shouldn't be allowed to run a chartered bank as a crypto bank. It's like using melted chocolate for your asset base. Just don't do it. So forget about that. I'm not even going to talk about those. That was a stupid move to have them. But SVB was a serious bank. I think it was number 16 or some number like that in the country. I didn't think it was badly managed. It's not my job to have an opinion on that. But I did start looking at this explanation of what happened, and I feel that even if it were badly managed, that's not a full explanation of what happened to that bank. So that's why I wrote this thing this week. Go ahead.
You make this interesting point in the Global Report that I haven't seen emphasized much anywhere else, which is, despite all of this emphasis on SVB being badly managed, what you see when you look at interest rates over time from the Fed is actually this massive shift, right? And so if you're someone who is trying to plan for the solvency of your bank and you're trying to make, arrangements as far as like which securities you're using to back your bank, that's not something that you would have necessarily expected, right? It was not a thing that an astute planner would likely have seen coming.
Right. I mean, we're not saying that they shouldn't have managed it anyway, better, but absolutely true what you're saying. And in fact, in the Global Report, I list just the last kind of 5 years of rates of change from year to year in that rate, interest rate, and the numbers are kind of tiny. They're like 17, minus 17, plus 17, 0, or close to 0, 0.07 or something. And then it's 6,085.
Right.
What the hell? I mean, no matter what you were used to. And by the way, that kind of zero stuff goes back all the way through quantitative easing. It goes back like 20 years. So I just didn't want to print it all because it was so boring. That it was boring. Everyone got used to it being pretty flat. And then suddenly 6,085 in 1 year. So I'm going to say that regardless of the bad management potential story inside SVB, because they weren't paying attention day by day, probably true, the Fed did something unbelievably stupid.
Why did they do that, in your opinion?
They created a crisis called inflation by printing money forever and ever and ever, like for 20 years. They weren't the only central bank, but they did that, knowing completely full well that if you print free money for 20 years, you're going to pay the piper eventually. You will get hit. And sure enough, it came. So here it is, the inflation thing. And that's how you create inflation. I mean, it's textbook. If you're taking a course saying, how do you create inflation? Just print money all day long for 20 years, see what happens. That's what'll happen. And so when it finally came to roost, and there they go, then they did the worst possible thing. They undermined the banking system intentionally. Wow.
What makes you think it was intentional?
I don't think that the people who run the Fed are stupid. I think that they knew that when they went up 6,085% in 1 year, it would undermine the mark-to-market value of the bonds that were being used as the most stable, important possible reserves you could have as a bank. And so, to be clear, this mark-to-market thing matters.
Was that 6,000 increase? You say it was on purpose. Like, was that just a panic move to fight inflation?
Yeah,
Was it?
it was.
I mean,
yes, it was. It was panic. The Fed panicked.
Okay.
They waited too long. They did the wrong thing in the beginning. They caused it themselves, and then they panicked when it finally showed up.
All right. So let's keep moving, because that wasn't actually, although that is an interesting backstory, that's not actually the point of your report.
No, it's not. It's one of the many interesting points, but it's not.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we dive into
Let's
that.
keep going. Okay.
Which is okay. So here you are in an extremely over leveraged bank, and you're in a really tight spot, but that wasn't necessarily right because of the Fed.
All right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go under.
No.
So what really happened to cause that massive run on SVB, in your opinion?
So back to the media story, which is it's Peter Thiel and his founders fund and so forth, told all their friends to get out, told their invested companies to get out, and that created the run. I don't think that's really the story. It's part of the story. But the more you look at it, you find out, well, the stock in these banks was dropping a long time before that. And Peter was probably watching that. Probably a lot of guys on Wall Street were watching that. So that's bad. Now, what was causing that? And so maybe it was just concerned shareholders, or maybe it was shorts, meaning people who are shorting stocks. Right. And no doubt it was shorts as well as normal investors. So you have hedge funds trying to knock it down, and they'll spread, rumors to try to make money. They'll knock it down it has to go down if they're going to make money. I get that. That happens, all the time. At the same time, though, something else was going on. And this is the part that I don't like. I don't think any bank, we'll take the last two real banks that went down. And I don't think any bank could sustain those losses in 48 hours, those runs. So
it was a huge amount.
44 billion for the first one and 100 billion for the second one. And it's like, no one can withstand that.
Right.
So you have to start selling assets to cover the cash requirements of that, no matter who you are. And so even if you're well capitalized, you get a lot of reserves, you got all these safe things like treasuries, in your back pocket. They're gonna, when they come due, you'll get your money, and suddenly you're against the wall. How did that happen? And the more you look, the more it seems as though that probably happened because there were bots driving the train at that point. Now, Peter may have put out a call and may have started the avalanche, but I don't think it was Peter's responsibility or even his story. I think you've got, so I'm going to jump cut here. We know from a guy named Tahira, who was just arrested, who was showing private classified files from America that we thought we had recorded Russian intel people bragging about, drumroll, having 100,000 bots inside our system, where we thought there were a few thousand. And they're laughing like, 100, we have 100,000. Those idiots don't even know how much we've got. Now, imagine if you put 100,000 bots just from Russia against your bank, whatever bank you like. And you just create all these rumors about sell, get out. Everybody better get out right now. That's not a Peter Thiel story. That's a Russia story. And I think, in fact, it wouldn't necessarily just be Russia. We know that Iran's been going after our banking system for years. And we know about CRINC, where Russia and Iran are working together with China and North Korea. Well, they have bots too, don't they? If you could take down the most important bank in American economic vitalism, I'll call it, which is Silicon Valley Bank. This is a bank at the center of creating all the startups in the world in America, right? Take that baby down. 2 days. I think that happened. And why wouldn't you if you could?
So I want to jump in a little bit here, because I think it's important for people to understand how this kind of thing happens in realistically.
Yeah.
And people often say, well, if that was happening, we would know, like we'd be able to tell which, and all of these people are tweeting about this who are real Americans. But what I've seen in actually digging into information warfare and misinformation is that the way bots are used are not necessarily as the voices of disinformation or misinformation. They are used to expand and help existing voices that are panicky and very binary and
Yes.
go viral. So
Yes.
so people like Jason Calacanis, who was freaking out on
He
Twitter
was
during the SVB collapse,
bad
or
dog. Yeah.
like those people are then their voices are promoted. They're
Mhm.
these respected American voices, and then that's what causes an increase in the panic, right? So
They
I
amplify
think
the voice to panic.
yeah, and then they chime in saying, well, I'm going to take my, the bots will say things like, well, I'm also I'm a founder and I'm going to pull all my money out. We took our money out last week, blah, blah, blah. And
Right.
that's like what winds up happening is this cacophony of panic online
Yes.
where it's very difficult to tell that it's not organic.
I believe that happened.
So what does that mean for the future?
Well, first of all, it probably means that these banks, I think the good news for people would be that these banks, and I'm skipping the crypto banks, they may have been badly managed, but they wouldn't have failed if they hadn't had a run of 100 billion in 2 days or 50 billion in 2 days, whatever the number is.
Right.
So the regulators need to pay more attention to not assuming that a CEO or a board within 24 to 48 hours can avoid being shut down by regulators if the regulators themselves aren't learning something here.
And what role should the regulators play in that system?
They should
right?
give them more time, I think. I think they should give them more time. They're worried about the panic part, the run part, but they might spend more attention on the bot part. And they might spend more attention on information warfare. And they might spend more time trying to educate all of us on these other causes of bank runs. So we don't run because the bank's in bad shape. We're running because the Russians are telling us to run,
right.
or the Chinese or somebody. And so there's a completely different way of dealing with that problem than taking over the bank and shutting it down, selling it for pieces. So not that they didn't do a good job this time around. I just think they missed it. So don't miss it again. Get ready for something like this to happen again, because it can happen to any bank. So the bad news is it can happen to anyone. I don't think banks can sustain that kind of bot-driven deposit withdrawal. And if you were Russia or Iran, whoever it was, and you knew how well it worked in 2 days,
Do it again.
you do it again, twice, 3 times, 10.
You probably wait a couple of weeks in between so it doesn't become quite so obvious. But
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's a lesson for everyone here. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've talked about regulators slowing things down. If you're a bank, there's nothing you can do to avoid a run on like that kind of run. Or is there? What can you do as a bank?
Well, I think the first part we're doing right now, just educating people that just because Twitter tells you that everyone's getting out of the bank, maybe that's not true. So maybe you should think about it a little bit before you pull your money out too. I guess everybody's already kind of reassessing their 250K limit, and I would suggest that FDIC expand that to reduce the ability to create these runs. Most groups are covered even at 250. If you go up to 500, probably you're going to cover 90% of the money or something. So I would just do more of that. And if they're covering it anyway, make it public and just cover it now. So that would reduce the chances of having a run. And then I would publicize what we're publicizing right now. And I'd mock the Russians, and I'd kind of make a joke out of it in a way, and just take the fear out of it to a bit. And then I'd go after them. I really would. I'd go, there are tools, And I would find out, I know you know this, Barrett, but there are ways to find out about bot armies that are not available to the public, but they're available to certain people. I think
Mhm.
Elon has access to those tools, and I would just go after him hammer and tongs. I'd publicize the hell out of it. I'd name names. I think it's time for us to be really honest as the West, not just as America, about how many bots are living in Facebook, how many bots are living in Twitter, in all the social networks, and get rid of them. And use AI against AI and just get the hell rid of them. And then sell that, no bots in here. If you have to use no more anonymity, fine, do that. If you have to use biometrics, do that. I don't care, but stop it. It's time now. We've seen the cost of it. Get rid of them.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Should I do?
Elon announced today that he is starting to purge more fake accounts. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Keep going, buddy. Do a good job.
Mark
Yeah.
Mark has known about the fake accounts for a long time. The other Mark, not you, and has not been doing much about it.
No.
I think the trick here is more public pressure, right?
Yes. He should spend more time getting rid of bots and less time in the gym. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Public service.
So thank you, Mark. If you would like to read the full global report, you can find the link below this video, and you can also become a member of the Strategic News Service there. We hope to see you in our ranks.
Yeah, and come to fire at the Terranea Resort. It's beautiful. See y'all there.
It's beautiful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.